So could you maybe we can go also a little bit deeper into
Sure.
the materials themselves
Sure.
and the you called them the social impact or the
Yeah. So for example, if I'm to give you an example, the one I did recently was if you're talking about steel and iron. Okay. So we all know what steel and iron is, and we know that it's impacted our life. But so I would teach you how we make steel and iron and everything else, and we have fun in those lectures. We do demos and we, make stuff, and then the social science lecture for that week is Andrew Carnegie, the story of Andrew Carnegie and the birth of U.S. Steel.
Mhm.
And what he did was he exploited something called a Bessemer furnace, which basically said rather than taking a material that you're going to when they made steel before then, they would stick a rod in there, they would turn it around, the guy would taste it and look at it and smell it and everything else and go, it's just come to steel. It's now come to nature, right? And you made little tiny batches of steel. Well, you're not going to make railroads that way. And he came in with a blast furnace and blew air through it and created steel in 15 minutes and tons of steel. And suddenly he had this mass production. But it put all those people who were called puddlers out of business. So there was a creative destruction. You create something, and when you create something new, you
okay.
destroy something old. And so you have to think
Okay.
about what your impact is on society there, right? So in this case, he put a lot of puddlers out of business, and that became a problem. And so how do you address that? And so then the future material for that week is magnesium. And so we talk about how magnesium is replacing steel because it's so much lighter, and it can be used for all sorts of interesting applications. And then what they have to do is they have to create a product using magnesium, but think of the creative destruction challenge that's faced with that. So the example I love is that I had a group who said they wanted to make drones for the movie industry out of magnesium. And I said, that's great. And so
Right. How
why?
about the cameraman?
Yeah, exactly. And you wind up with you're displacing the cameraman. And so what do? You teach them to fly your drones. And if you teach them to fly their drones, then they have all the contacts in the movie industry. So that's and so it's now all of a sudden you're not just making a drone, you're making a drone that has a dedicated audience. And so that's by understanding your creative destruction challenge there, you're also creating a product that has a much greater chance of being successful. And you're giving them a job, right? You're giving them a new opportunity. You're retraining them in a new area. And so recognizing that when you destroy something or you're displacing people, if you can work with those people to retrain them into your new product, then they're going to be much better off, right? And you're going to be much better off because they've got a lot of contained knowledge in their background. And so that's the social side of it, right? It has nothing to do with making a better product.
Right.
It has everything to do with understanding that you engineer inherently to help society. So society is going to influence your engineering, right? We make things to help people, right? And so we're not making things to not help people. We're making things to kind of change society for the better, hopefully. And so, and every week it's a different material. And so we do aluminum. And when we do aluminum, we talk about the birth of Alcoa and how Alcoa was a company that was basically found to be in violation of antitrust. They were seen as being a monopoly, but they were not a monopoly because they tried to buy everybody out. They were just really good at what they did, right? And so they became a monopoly. And so understanding in that week, it's all about intellectual property and monopolies and how do you deal with this, right? So if you create something, do you make it a trade secret like Coca-Cola and don't tell anybody about it, right? Recognize that if somebody figures it out, they can go off and make Coca-Cola, right? Or do you patent it and recognize that you're going to have that patent for 17 years or whatever, and then you're going to lose that patent, but you also have to enforce that patent. And so how do you address your intellectual property when you create something new? So when you create an innovation, how do you want to address that? And there's no right or wrong answer. Right. Everybody has a different way of doing it, and they might do it for very different reasons. Some people will say, no, I'm going to patent it, but I'm also going to license it to anybody who wants it, right? You see this right now with the COVID vaccines, right? Do you patent that and do you protect it, or do you share it with third world countries, so that they can have access to it? And how do you deal with the patent rights? You have an obligation to your stockholders, but you also have an obligation to society. So teasing that out is interesting. So every week it's something fun and different.
Yeah, so for example, in that specific example, I think it's pretty cool that you teach that, because something that I was thinking is that this lessons on society can be applied to not just material sciences, right?
No, this is all engineering. All engineering.
And it can be like, for example, computer science. For example, I was thinking of the examples you were talking about, monopolizing an industry, and when something new is created, which is inherent in when something new is created, you're the only one that has it, right?
That's right.
You're technically a monopoly,
right?
So, for example, are you aware of DeepMind? DeepMind is this company that they do artificial intelligence, and they created this new artificial intelligence model that basically solves protein folding problems.
Okay.
And they solve this problem that has been like a decades-old problem that no biologist has solved before, and they feed a lot of that data into the model, and they were able to solve this problem and with performance that no biologist could have ever done before. And what they did is that they just released it to the public. Right? They did the analysis, or at least how the CEO puts it, is that they did the analysis of how is this product can be the most beneficial to society.
Right.
And they decided that, at least for that specific product, the most beneficial could be to just release it to the public.
Sure.
And that has been used for many companies and researchers and whatever to start having this tool to solve their own problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And so sometimes that's exactly what you'll decide is that it's better in the end to go ahead and release it and let it go out there and recognize that it will help society as a whole, and you will make your money somewhere else, right, along the way, right?
I think so.
And so, and it will come back to you, right, in ways that you might not expect, but it does help you generate that sense that you're doing something good for society, and that's I think a very strong sense amongst a lot of innovators these days. Is that it's not all about the money. It's about doing something that actually makes society better, and that's really cool. I think that's awesome.
I think so.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think as you were saying, for example, the main purpose of a company is to make money, right?
Sure.
But just solely thinking about making money can like shield other opportunities that might come as...
Well, it's interesting, right? Just look at Andrew Carnegie, right? He does this. He becomes the richest man in the world.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then what does he do for the last 20 years of his life? He sets up foundations and gives his money away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the Carnegie Foundation, the Carnegie schools, everything else, right? So in a sense, it's almost like they recognize that money for money's sake is not the end goal, right? Look at Bill Gates. He's spending vast quantities of money trying to help better society, right? Help cure certain diseases and things like that. And so I do think that people, recognize that later in life, and sometimes they get it earlier in life too, and they realize they don't have to wait till they're old before they can start giving everything, setting up foundations and doing philanthropy.